Welcome to this episode of the Leading Well podcast, hosted by Zach and Bowden. This podcast is an ongoing conversation to provide you with the practical tools, inspiring stories, to awaken the passions God has placed in you, to help you lead well, both in the church and in the community.
Welcome to our Leading Well podcast, and we're excited for the conversation. Today we have our first repeat guest, Kim Parrish. So congratulations.
Woohoo!
So Kim Parrish, she was, I think your episode 2, I think you were on. And in that one, we talked about the idea of leading well, to lead well. Leadership is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes.
And so welcome back.
Thanp you.
Yeah. Maybe if people don't know who you are, why don't you just share a little bit who you are?
Well, I have the privilege of serving as the Children's Ministry Director here at New Life. I've been in this position for about 11 months now, so I'm thoroughly enjoying my opportunity to serve here.
And a little about your family?
I am married to my husband, Ben, for 21 years. We have 4 kiddos. I have 3 teenagers and a toddler, so life is full and fun around our house.
Yeah, that's the way you like it, though, isn't it?
It is, loud and crazy.
Yeah. And so we're in this series where we just kind of recently hosted our Thrive conference a few weeks ago, and you led a breakout session. And so we're just kind of having a conversation about your breakout session. So give us the topic of that breakout, and why was this topic significant to you?
So my topic was helping you facilitate a group discussion or lead a group that would lead to spiritual transformation. And for us, our ministry teams, whether children's ministry, students ministry, or adult ministry, are all set up with small groups. And I just think it's so important to remind people the impact that a small group can have if you're intentional through that, and what does that intentionality look like?
And so, take us kind of, where was kind of the big idea, the heart behind your breakout?
I would say the first big heart behind it was just making leaders aware of you can't lead a group where you're not willing to go yourself, but not to feel like the growth of the group was fully dependent on you. Leading a group for growth and for change and transformation really means leading them to Christ. And what does that look like? Not that you've got to have it all figured out, because then they're limited to your knowledge, but leading them to seeking after God and where God is calling.
And so when you say be willing to lead them where you're going to lead yourself, explain that a little bit more.
So if you are wanting to lead a group for growth or change, only comes through Christ. And so you have to be able to spend the time before God yourself. Where are you with your spiritual disciplines? Where are you with allowing God to speak to you in your life? How are you with serving others, walking out what God is calling you to? You can't teach a group or try to lead a group to have a relationship with Christ and putting the priorities in your life if you're also not doing that.
It's this important idea, to lead others, God needs to be leading you. But on the flip side, though, it's so easy for us to think like we got to have all our act together before we could lead anyone else or help anyone else. Right. And so talk about that tension between us leading ourselves well and letting God lead us to lead it, but also that sense of not having to be perfect or 10 steps ahead of everybody else.
Right. So one of the best things I think about this breakout session was sharing a little bit about my testimony, and that all growing up, I only saw Sunday school teachers or small group leaders that had it all together in appearance. And all that led me to was always feeling like I had to have my act together before coming to God. And that really in growth is being transparent with one another and showing one another our testimony of what Christ has done through our life. But that means being transparent about our weaknesses and our strengths, and allowing them to see what God has done for us in our life and who God is through us.
Yeah. And I think Tex and I talked about this in our episode a few weeks ago I use the phrase, sometimes all you be as a leader is just a half a step ahead. And a half a step could really just mean, hey, I'm praying the morning of our group before we meet that night, and I'm walking through the study. That's not always the most ideal, for sure.
Right, yes.
And even just being honest and aware of that. But so often we feel like as leaders, we have to be like 10 steps ahead of somebody else to be their leader. Oh, I don't know enough. I don't have enough knowledge, or haven't been around church or that much leadership. And there's sometimes that's really helpful. But sometimes it's learning just to say, God, use me today. God, lead me today. It's more of a spirit, or more of an attitude of openness, and just being faithful to God rather than how much you know, or how much, or how involved you are.
I would even say a leader of a group is someone who also can be there because they're being intentional, because they are going before God, just seeking his wisdom on the behalf of that group, and praying for that group, and being intentional with their times and skills and talents for the purpose of that group, especially when leading adults. I think intentionality is sometimes the biggest difference there.
Yeah. So one, kind of being willing to walk where you want other people to walk, kind of modeling that and being willing. Doesn't mean you have all the answers and know everything, but be willing to walk in humility with an attitude of loving God and loving others, and letting him lead you through that. What was another kind of big heartbeat kind of behind this breakout? I
think one of the things I love that I learned from Pastor John was just the difference between teaching and preaching. And I think that flows into what we're saying about being prepared for this. I think oftentimes we think we have to prepare a few questions, but we only want to prepare questions that we know the answer to. And I think really a group for change is that you're bringing in questions that you yourself are even going to have to pursue God on and be challenged in. So that way your group is then pushed towards going home and pursuing God more and reading in his word and finding an answer there. But that allows for discussion and growth in your group.
Maybe put you totally on the spot here, so sorry. Give me an example what you mean of like some good questions compared to bad questions, or even just a thought process behind that.
I think you want to ask questions that are open-ended. You want to ask questions that are engaging. You want to ask questions that make people think. You don't necessarily want to ask an easy question, but you want them to be engaged. And I think sometimes, especially, we may steer clear from things in the Bible that we don't have a direct answer of. But there's a lot in the Bible that God is not going to give us full revelation on. But be willing to dig through the scriptures together. So ask, what did you think about this? When I read this, I kind of thought this, but from your perspective, where do you see it? And be willing to let conversations go in a place where you don't feel like you have the great control over, because it may make you all go back to the scriptures and pursue God.
Your third heartbeat behind this breakout.
So we've already mentioned transparency. We've talked about humility. I would say just caring well for other people, creating an environment for caring. One of the worst things about a group, if the leader is the only one caring, you really want to set a platform for a group to care for each other. Even with children, you model and you teach them how to care for one another. And I think the more someone knows even how much a group cares, the more they're willing to listen, the more they're willing to grow and also be transparent. And that just creates a wonderful platform for growth.
But that's hard.
Yeah.
Because usually that means we have to get messy with people. And sometimes we have to put down our agenda of maybe getting through a study or our talking points through a meeting we're in, and just stopping and saying, hey, how are you doing today? And that's a hard thing for us sometimes to do. Why is that?
I think because we're agenda based, we think we're only there for the purpose of getting through this study. And if that's our goal, then you're going to do great cranking through that study. But if your goal is growth, you're going to recognize that growth in relationship is where that comes from. And being willing to be there, to love each other well, to be the hands and feet of Christ together. And it doesn't always mean sitting around and talking. It may often mean praying for one another, serving one another, loving one another, but taking that time to honor people. I mean, that's the example Christ set for us.
Yeah. So give us an example how that might look like even in your world with children's, and maybe even in the groups that you've been a part of in the past, now or in the past.
I think one of the hard things that we can do as a children's leader is if you're discussing something, and let's say a child drops a bomb of something that's going on in their world, as they say, hey, this is what happened in my life this week. We panic and don't know what to do with it, so we brush over it and go to the next question. And that's the worst thing ever, because that doesn't make a child feel heard or known. And so you can stop and acknowledge, that's really hard. I'm so sorry you're walking through that. And what can we do to support you? And, let's say it's a little boy who's a child. He may not have the ability to tell you what he needs, but stop the group right now and encourage the children to pray for him and what was just said. And then just continue to seek God, reach out to the family, see what you can do to support that child. But that is more important than going on to the next question.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not even the most critical things you might say in life. Like it's easy. It's sometimes almost easier when it's like, oh, there's a significant thing. We know we need to stop and hit pause.
Right.
I even think of my own son or my daughter who would do this, or they're 7 and 3. They don't have crisis going on in their lives right now.
Right.
But they might say something around the dinner table or in passing that I'm like, oh, that's important to you. And I need to stop what I'm doing to listen or to engage or participate. And so whether it's for kids or if it's even for adults, it's easy to do the life crisis stuff.
Yes.
But the things that are significant, it's easy for us just to blow past those because they're an inconvenience maybe, or they don't go with our plan, or what's happening in the moment to really stop and to engage. Where it's somebody who just had a hard day at work, or somebody who, whatever reason they're not engaged or not talking, there could be stuff going on that it's easy for us just to kind of bypass things that aren't life crisis, or headline news for people. But we need to stop and to engage and care for people well.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the great tips I gave in my breakout session was walking through 1 Corinthians 13, really studying that and seeing what love is, and then praying through that with every person in your small group. Like God, using that as a check-in tool for where am I in my relationship with this person, and praying through that and seeing any relationship struggles you have with them, or even just making you more intentional with them. And I think that's a good thing to help you bring that person the little things in their life, not just the huge crisis, but, help me notice about this person in my group. What can I see about them, and how can I pursue them where they are and what's important? One of our trainings this week, we told our leaders that you may be the only adult who's had a moment to sit and have a face-to-face conversation with that child to let them feel important that week. That makes a huge difference. Even that little piece of just hearing about their math test makes a big difference in their world.
Yeah. And we say it, and it's easy to say, but it's just the importance of praying for people. And I'm guilty of this as just anyone else. Like, oh yeah, I'll pray for you, and I might pray for you in the moment right there, but it might be a day, it might be 2 days, it might be 3, 4, 5, and before I even think about even praying for you again. But just really being intentional on praying for people. And it's amazing what God does in our hearts, both in us, especially when we start really praying for people. Our ability to love and care and be compassionate and gentle, or strong and truthful, all those things.
Yes.
Just grow. We say we pray for you, but if we're honest, how often do we really take time to pray for those people in our groups or on our teams or in our families, whatever it might be, of doing that well?
I think that is the intentionality that is needed for a group leader to have a group for change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What another heartbeat you had?
I think it's really big to challenge your group. I proposed the idea of like a check-in that every 6 months to a year that you would walk through, where are you in life in these regards? We talk about in life that we have a plumb line, and sometimes if you're just a little off, it doesn't matter in the beginning, but several months down the road, you can be way off. So just to check in on where you as a group are, and then walking together of holding each other to that. Even growing in things together is a huge thing. Growing in spiritual disciplines together, agreeing to pray together for something in common, setting up what it means to fast for something, just spiritual disciplines that you would grow and be iron sharpening iron in those relationships, because that is always so much more impactful when you do it with a group, because there's accountability and then there's heightened awareness through a shared experience.
There's lots of ways you could do that. I even top of my head, I think of like, how well are we connecting with God together? And you brought up some of those questions of, are we just studying God's word, which is great, but there's other ways to connect with God together as a group. How well are you connecting with each other? Are the relationships that you're building, are they authentic? Are they real? Are they deepening? Or do you just get together every Tuesday night for brownies?
Right.
But what is that? Yeah. Do you take time to get to know each other and to know what's going on in each other's lives, not just the surface level, but even the deep stuff?
Right.
Another one I would ask is, like, how well are you serving our community together? And, you can't be neutral in your sharing your faith. You either move as a positive or a negative impact. People know if you're meeting at a home every Tuesday night, there's something that's happening there. Yeah. And people recognize you take up parking spots and you are there. But are you making a difference? Are you serving the community? Are you sharing Jesus with people? Are you making an internal difference in people's lives around you together?
Right.
Those are 3 easy questions to kind of, if you're going to do a checklist every few months, like, how are we doing, both as an individual, but also as a group in that conversation? Right.
We encouraged in this breakout session for people to figure out a way for their group to serve within the church, and then with also in the community. So finding your place, as you're growing together and you're healthy together in your growth with the Lord and your relationships, and then making sure that you find your place to serve in the church. Of course, I offer the opportunity to serve at children's ministry events or serve on Sunday morning, but whatever suits your group, but then also finding the opportunity to serve outside, and not just a scatter approach, but like finding something your group can truly be dedicated to.
Yeah. There's something significant when you serve alongside someone. You just came back from India with a small group of people. Like, when you serve, especially on a mission trip capacity, for you get to know people really quick, really fast.
Yes.
And you see who they are, and the opportunity to build relationships is significant. And I'm not saying every group should go on, or every ministry team should go on a mission trip. Go for it if you wanted to.
Right.
Like, we would encourage that for sure. But there's something about when you get out of off the couch and go serve somewhere together, the unity and the love that you have for each other grows in ways you never can when you just sit on the couch and study God's word and pray for one another. Right. It's significant. And the ability for you it actually helps you grow your relationship with God. It helps you grow in your relationship with one another when you go out and you serve other people.
Right. Well, and I think it's the same as when you've been praying or fasting for something together and you see how God is moving that and you're celebrating in that together. But then when you go and serve others and you're celebrating in that experience and that growth together and the reward from serving others. So it's about shared experience and growth together in God, and then celebrating that together.
What on the flip side, so you kind of walked through some of the heartbeat kind of a healthy group. What are some of the challenges that group face that make these heartbeats for you shared so hard?
I think just personalities. We're people. We have to set our own agendas aside. I think as the leader begins to set their own agenda aside and their own fears or their own struggles or their own desire to be in control, and just bring that before God, and then searching our hearts and how we're loving people. I think relationships and how people relate to one another. It's a great way to learn how to grow together in relationship together in small group. It excites me for children because I think it allows an opportunity for an adult that's not a parent to direct and how children treat each other. I think that's a beautiful thing, that when you see 5th and 6th grade boys supporting one another in this type of model. But I think also for adults to have that something modeled for you, but then also walking through life together and learning how, and just relationships and getting over yourself in these situations.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for what you do for our kids here at New Life. I think my 3-year-old son right now, that I love the knowing that for the next 15 years of his life that he is going to live in groups of people as an adult or two in his life or for the next 15 years that are going to invest in care and support him. That there'll be a group of boys, most likely, that will just come alongside and be his friend and walk through these next 15 years of childhood and adolescence and teenagers, and that we have a church who wants to create groups for people, even from there down to the very littlest to the very oldest, that there's ways that we could walk and be the church in together, that we could be the village in a sense of together. And so thank you for helping us create groups down to our littlest and then up to our oldest as well, and investing into people's lives. As you wrap this up for our conversation, any last thoughts or perspectives that are really helpful to share?
I would just say the one thing that we want to remember is just like even with a family, you want to have fun together. So search for ways that you can have fun together, that you can celebrate. I think that's really important. You want to think of your small group as a family and what aspects and parts are needed for a healthy family. And that's really important, just to have that experience together as well.
Well, thanks, Kim. Thanks for sharing even at Thrive. Thank you for being part of the conversation. But thanks just for your leadership as you continue to help New Life continue to grow in our ability to love God and love others and love the community around us. And so thanks for your leadership and direction there.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate the opportunity.
That's this month's Leading Well conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Leading Well podcast. Let us know your thoughts by leaving your review. Be sure to subscribe and share these episodes through iTunes, Google Play, and Podbean. You can also connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. Until next time, continue to look for ways to unleash your leadership potential to make a difference.